That was Corey Asprey with Egypt, the live radio version. You're on 94.9. It's 14 minutes past 4, and it's Tuesday afternoon, time for Creation Ministries International. And today we've got Dr. John, but we don't have Dr. John. Hey, how does that work? It's because Dr. John's not in the studio like he normally is. It's Dr. John on the phone. How are you going, Dr. John?
I'm going very well, Mick. I'm sorry I'm not in the studio because I believe it's your birthday, which is a great shame because I would have brought you in a cake. But, yeah, I'm not in the studio. So how about that?
That would have done wonders for my sugars. So, yeah, thank you for the happy birthday. But, yeah, whereabouts are you, Dr. John?
Actually, Mick, I'm on the Gold Coast. You might think I'm having a holiday, but I'm not. I'm dog and cat sitting for my son who lives up here. And he and his family are having the holiday and, Heather and I are doing the work.
All right. Have you been down to the beach?
Yes, but it was windy and not pleasant, so we left that, and that was a couple of weeks ago. So actually, the weather hasn't been all that wonderful. It's been pretty poor.
No, well, I was going to ask what the sand is like because I know that they lost so much sand off that beach.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll be recovering, but I haven't actually had a look, I have to admit.
Yeah, well, they've got a big ship just off the coast sitting there, and it literally pumps tons of sand back towards the beach, and it's just sitting there pumping it. If you go back down, you'll see the ship there, pumping all that sand back onto the beach. It's interesting.
All right, well, I'll have to have a look at that because that would be interesting. But those beaches always recover. You know, they're pretty good.
Yeah. So what are you saying? We're not going to get another flood?
Well, I don't know, Mick, but I mean, they haven't been recovering like that for millions of years, that I do know. But they might have been recovering like that for a couple of thousand.
Yes, okay. Yes, and Dr. John, I believe we're, I've got to ask first, did you listen to our last few weeks?
Oh, yeah. Look, I love listening to Mark Howard. I thought he was... he's always very, very good and easy to listen to. And he's got so much knowledge. And what he was talking about last week with Noah's flood, that was just fantastic. And the thing that really got home to me was how privileged we are here on the coast. Well, I'm not on the coast at the moment, but on the Central Coast, to have so much evidence for Noah's flood right on our doorstep.
Yeah.
You know, every time we drive down to Sydney on the M1, we pass through all those layers of sandstone, which, as Mark explained, can only have been laid down by a massive flood like the one described in the Bible. You know, there's absolutely no other possible explanation because when we have a massive flood these days, the amount of sediment that you get forming even after the largest modern-day floods, it's only a few centimetres at best, you know, and it would hardly be enough to bury a mouse, let alone the monstrous fossils and animals that we find everywhere in the fossil record.
Yeah.
So it has to have been a massive one-off event that, and there's never been anything like it in the entire history of the world. I mean, it was a world-changing event. I mean, we've had events that we call world-changing, but that was absolutely transforming the original created world into the one that we've got now. And the one we have now is quite clearly absolutely nothing like the one that was there before that flood.
Yeah.
It's completely different. And, you know, when you look at all those layers as you drive down the M1, there's no way they could have been formed layer by layer over millions of years because apart from the bends in them, and as you know, rock doesn't bend very well, apart from the bends in them, when you look at the interface between them, it's always a very sharp interface, and there's no soil or vegetation in between the layers.
Yep.
So it's impossible that they could have been lying there for millions of years waiting for the next layer to come upon them. You know, as Mark explained, the way water flows, the only explanation for what we see there is absolutely massive amounts of water, the like of which has never really been seen in history. Yeah. So, you know, it's just wonderful, I reckon, to see that.
Yes, absolutely. And he spoke about the rivers as well, like the Hawkesbury, and you know how it's been carved out, and even some of the rivers over in America, about how they're way, way, way too small to have made the giant canyons.
Yeah, that's right. They call them underfit, I think, because what you see, the valleys and the canyons, are so much wider than the little river that runs down the bottom. I mean, the Hawkesbury's not a bad-sized river, but when you look at the valley, it's much bigger than that river. So the rivers are actually a leftover of what was originally there. And then if you think about the whole of the rest of our area, you know, all of the coal that's here in the Sydney Basin, right from Newcastle down to Wollongong, we're standing on it all, and that can only have been formed by a massive flood, because the vegetation that formed it didn't grow in that location. It's obviously been transported in there and deposited by massive floodwaters, and that's where our coal comes from. You know, and the interesting thing about a lot of the coal seams, you know, you might have a coal seam several metres thick, and then may have a bit of a layer of sand on top of that, and then another coal seam on top of that, and so on. And what you get, you see these tree trunks that go through several layers, several seams. Now, that means they can't possibly have grown there. You know, they have to have been transported, and they're just standing there upright, and they've become coal as well. But they go through several seams. Yeah. So really, all of this evidence is just so fantastic in our local area for the truth of the Bible's history of that flood.
Yeah, and of course where you are at the moment, just off the coast there, or in fact that South Stradbroke Island is the first of the Sand Islands. Then you've got, Moreton Bay and the island there. I don't know what that one's called. There's North Stradbroke, and then I think it's Moreton Island. And then, of course, above that, K'gari, which was Fraser Island. I think it's the world's largest sand island. And we've seen some massive, massive storms and cyclones and stuff pushing through there. And, we've seen I guess up on the Sunshine Coast, a break in one of the islands, and all we've really seen is a bit of sand getting pushed around. We haven't seen anything in our huge storms, and it's to the magnitude of what actually happened during Noah's flood and what we see the evidence of.
Yeah, well, that's right. And, we're some of our, experts who we've had on the program, experts in that particular area. And, they know that you could not possibly have formed those islands in the way that modern science wants to insist that you did. And, the other thing that really is so interesting about the biblical account of the flood is, we know it. We know it all because in Western society we've grown up with the Bible and the stories that came out of the Bible. Yep. But when missionaries have got to cultures that had never had any contact with other missionaries or any contact with the Bible or any of the other stories from the Middle East, the Aboriginal people and the Pacific Islanders, they've all got stories about a great flood. And amazingly enough, although the stories are never the same, there's enough similarity in them to make you realise that they have to be talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you often get a story a bit garbled if you compare it with the Bible's one, but of a flood that was sent by the gods, and a favoured family escaped, and they did it in a boat with a lot of animals, things like this. Now, the only possible explanation for that is that their earliest ancestors must have experienced that flood and passed on the stories and the legends, really, the Bible's account is there's 3 chapters in Genesis about the flood, and it's a very, very specific and clear description of what happened, whereas most of the indigenous ones are fairly garbled and a bit far-fetched. But they do have the essence of it. As I said, the favoured family escaping in a boat with animals, and a flood that was sent by the gods.
Yep.
So, and of course the Bible tells us that the whole earth has been populated by the 8 survivors of the ark, and that includes all the indigenous tribes throughout the whole earth.
Yep.
And I think when you look at the other evidence that we have for the truth of the Bible, when we say that everybody on the face of the earth has been descended from that one family that survived the ark, when you have a look at the DNA and the genetic evidence, even the secular scientific world has to acknowledge that it is consistent with what the Bible says. Now, they don't want to believe what the Bible says, but science acknowledges that woman that we call mitochondrial Eve. Now, we've talked about mitochondrial Eve on this program before,
Yep.
but what it does show is that there is some DNA in structures inside our cells called mitochondria, and they're only passed on by females because they form part of the egg that's not in not part of the nucleus.
Yep.
So only women can pass it on, and science knows when you trace back the mitochondrial DNA, it all traces back to one woman. And they call her mitochondrial Eve. Now, of course, they don't believe that she was the biblical Eve, but it's just amazing, an amazing confirmation of what the Bible actually says.
Absolutely. Dr. John, we're going to have to go into a break just now. We'll come back to Dr. John very shortly. If you have any questions for Dr. John, love you to send your questions through. Just text 0401 949 949. We'll be back after a couple of songs and some weather and traffic. That was Jimmy Gravity with More of You. You're on 94.9. It is 23 minutes to 5. And we have Dr. John on the line from Creation Ministries International. If you have any questions for Dr. John, please send them through to our text line 0401 949 949. And, of course, if you do have any questions afterwards and you've missed sending the question through, just head to creation.com. You can type your questions in there, and there's thousands of pages of information. They'll probably have an answer for you. Now, Dr. John, you were telling us all about mitochondrial Eve.
Yeah, that's something that was really a surprise to the biological scientists, because they are aware that all of the DNA that every one of us has in our mitochondria, which are little other elements inside our cells, they can all trace back through history, and it all funnels back to just one woman. So we are all descended from this one woman in our background, and of course, for obvious reasons, they call her mitochondrial Eve. And you would think that that would be enough to convince some of the scientists that maybe the Bible has got something going for it. Yep. And as if that's not enough, they have identified another bloke who they call Y chromosome Adam, and it's interesting.
Interesting. They've got an Adam and Eve as well.
That's right. Well, all men have got a Y chromosome, and we can all trace our Y chromosome right back through history to one man. And obviously, they call him Y chromosome Adam.
Wow.
So here we have, science has demonstrated that on the male side, we've got Y chromosome Adam, and on the female side, we've got mitochondrial Eve. Now, of course, they refuse to admit that they could be the biblical Adam and Eve.
Yes.
They say, well, they didn't even necessarily live at the same time. They could be millions of years apart, all of this sort of stuff. But the fact of the matter is there is one man and one woman in the background history of everybody on the face of the planet.
Yep.
Now, when you think about it, Darwin had no idea about this, of course, because genetics and DNA hadn't been discovered when he did his travels and wrote his books. And he would never have predicted that. And all his opinions about the different evolutionary origins of the various indigenous groups throughout the world, he thought, the white Europeans were by far the most evolved group of people on Earth, and that some of the darker-skinned indigenous groups were really destined to fade out because they were much lower down, in his opinion, on the evolutionary scale.
Yep.
But what science actually has discovered is that there is plenty of evidence that we are all actually descended from one man and one woman. They don't want to admit it, and it's easy to laugh it off and say science is in denial because they refuse to acknowledge that they could be the biblical Adam and Eve. But it's quite serious because the eternal consequences are pretty dire.
Yep.
Now, I've said many times on this program that when you deny biblical truth in one area, that casts doubt on all areas, and particularly the story of Jesus, because our Bible tells us that there's no salvation apart from submission to him as Lord and a genuine, heartfelt belief in the truth of his resurrection. And when we have a look at what the Apostle Paul told the Greek philosophers in Athens, they said that the resurrection of he said that the resurrection of Jesus was God's proof that there's going to be a coming judgment. Well, we really ought to take notice of that, and a lot of the Greek philosophers scoffed, but some of them listened intently, and they really wanted to hear more.
Yep.
And that was the turning point for me personally, because I was privileged to be invited to watch a film about the resurrection when I really didn't have any great interest in it anyway. Now, I'd heard about that as a child, but I really hadn't paid sufficient attention to it. And it was only when I was confronted with the undeniable evidence for it that I finally believed, and God was able to confirm it to me spiritually.
Yep.
But that's when I had to make a decision about the rest of the Bible, because I'd simply accepted the so-called evidence for evolution that was presented in my medical course, and I didn't realize at that time that it was all based on fraud. It was contrived and manipulated evidence, and really there just wasn't any genuine truth in it. And most people who've studied the biological sciences at tertiary level, they've been presented with this so-called evidence, and they've got no idea that it doesn't have any real foundation. And people often say, how is it that so many scientists are evolutionists? Well, the problem is that they're completely unaware that the so-called evidence they got presented with during their courses really doesn't have any foundation. And they've just simply accepted it because that's what they were taught. And of course, the graduates then become the next professors and tutors and whatever, and they just continue to teach the same stuff that they've ever presented, and was presented to them.
Dr. John, a few years ago, you mentioned a television show that was a non-Christian show called DNA Nation, where they followed a whole bunch of people's sort of DNA back in time, and there was Aboriginals, there was white people, and they all followed their DNA back to pretty much the exact place and the same time. Why do we still see the picture that goes from monkeys to black people to white people? Why do we still see that picture if it's pretty much been proven and not even in Christian circles?
I know. Interesting. It was Ernie Dingo who was the Aboriginal guy in that program.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, that's quite true, So if you believe in evolution, you've got to say that programs like that are wrong, and yet they're not. We know that when you follow through with the DNA, it does turn out that we all have the same origins. And we could go on with other evidences like languages and things like that. And what the Bible talks about is so obviously consistent with the observed facts. Yes. And yet people just want to reject it. They want to reject it basically because the human heart is desperately wicked, and it is arraigned against God until it becomes a believing Christian, really. And that's what we're faced with. And unfortunately, as we know, Creation Ministries really exists to get all of this information out to the public. And tragically, a lot of Christians and even Christian church leaders are still swayed by the claims of the evolutionists about that science has demonstrated the truth of what they claim, when, of course, we know that it hasn't. And we put forward the true evidences that are absolutely consistent with the Bible. And unless Christian people are aware of that, it's very easy for them to get shouted down in any discussion with their neighbours and other people that they're trying to witness to. Because, if you think that, or if you don't really know what you're talking about and the other person seems to know what they're talking about, then you really haven't got a leg to stand on. Yeah. And it's only if you are aware of the sort of truths that we put across at Creation Ministries that you are able to stand your ground and I don't mean shout down or correct, but gently explain to people, no, what you're saying flies in the face of actually the true evidence, which you will find, as you rightly mentioned before, Mick, in all of the articles on the creation.com website.
Absolutely.
And anybody who's got a question, all they need to do is to go to that website, type their question into the search window, and they will find a raft of papers on that particular topic, and it will explain it all very, very clearly in language anybody can understand. It's not highly technical. It's just factual stuff that has been discovered and is entirely consistent with what the Bible has always said.
Yes. You are on 94.9. Dr. John, another awesome week. Thank you. And I believe next week we're going to have a different speaker from Creation Ministries. Yep. We've got Michael Thompson coming on.
Yes, and I believe he's one of our new speakers, and I don't know what his specialty is, but it would pay people to listen in next week, I'm quite sure.
I believe his expertise, he's done a PhD in coastal processes and computer science, including artificial intelligence.
Well, you ought to be able to have a great chat with him, Mick, because that's your specialty as well.
Oh, well, I certainly love that stuff. It will be an awesome week. But thank you, Dr. John. Another fantastic week. And look, you have a good time up the coast. We look forward to the next time we're speaking with you back down here on the Central Coast.
Good on you, Mick. Thanks for having me, mate.
You're on 94.9. It is 11 minutes to 5.